All right. Hello, everyone. I'd like to invite you to our October the 9th workshop. Thank you all for coming. First up, we have the chief. You're going to come on down. We've got a couple new officers, and we want to do a swearing in here if we could. Workshop.
Okay, so you can be up here. Come here, come here.
We could technically, but
Face back.
I have it on the workshop before.
Hello. So I'd like to introduce everyone to two of our newest officers. And if you just pardon me while I read a little bit about them. To the left is David Benedict. Officer Benedict was born and raised right here in Cecil County. He's a graduate of Perryville High School. He wasn't real sure what his career path he was going to enter, so he chose to enter the workforce and had a position with Carter Lumber in Northeast for a while. But as we all know, life has a way of showing us where we're needed. And through a tragic family event, Officer Benedict felt the calling to become a police officer. And he came here and started with EPD and began to train at Baltimore City's Police Academy. He's just graduated from there on September 12th, and he's currently in field training under the direction of Officer First Class Michael McGonigal. So you take a minute and welcome Officer Benedict. And next to him, I'd like to introduce you to Catherine Johnson, who I am told prefers to go by Mercedes, so I'll refer to her as that. Officer Johnson was born in Howard County, but raised in Harford County, where she graduated from Edgewood High School. She's worked with a couple other agencies and was already a certified Maryland police officer when she came to work with us. She'd also worked in South Carolina prior to applying with EPD. Most recently, she was a police officer in South Carolina and decided she wanted to move closer to home to be with family. Began field training in August under the direction of Officer First Class Jeffrey Chandler, and she's currently assigned to our Patrol Squad B. So take a minute and welcome her.
Okay. Ask you to raise your right hand and say your name. I'll keep it nice and easy. State your name. Go ahead. I, Dave Benedict, do swear and affirm that I support the Constitution of the United States, that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland, and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of police officer according to the Constitution and laws of this state. Welcome aboard.
And I'm gonna also have you sign everything. I'll just flip also.
All right, go ahead. Let's see a couple autographs on there, and then we'll get a couple photos if we could. My Eagle shirt in there. Picture of that. Will my Ravens color?
They're also signing a Sanctity of Life pledge, which is mandated by the police training mission here in the state of Maryland. Ours basically says, after it cites the law and all that, they do hereby recognize that all life is precious and valuable, and pledge that they'll do their job ethically to protect all persons.
I need to sign. I'll sign as soon as we get our picture
Okay,
taken.
fantastic. Over here.
All right. Big smiles, everyone behind us. Okay. Come on, big smiles. Okay.
Commissioner Massinian. Yeah, there we go. Get that.
Hold me, Eric.
There, get closer. Look at that thing. There, now I can see everybody's face. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
You guys, just want to introduce you to the commissioners, to Commissioner Jean Brummel, Commissioner Charles Gibbons, Mr. Paul Pine, and Commissioner.
Thank you. We are,
Oh, give me one. Yeah. Right.
all righty. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next up, we have the employee of the quarter and a service milestone recognition. Andy Rodriguez, lay it on us.
Good afternoon. I'd like to recognize, these are the employees that celebrates milestones last quarter. Mr. Jimmy Ned Ramey, 10 years.
Jimmy, come up here. and
If your
stand
name
right-
is called, if you could just stand and wait so we can take pictures.
Yeah, come on, come on up, and stand right in front of us. And stand right here in front of all of us.
Detective Salisbury, come on up. Thank you.
How many years was that one? 10 years.
Felt that long too?
Oh, my God.
Sydney, 20 years.
20 years. Andy, please say his last name for us.
I don't want to ruin your day.
Everybody wrote.
Help me out. Ojo Fatima.
Hey.
Should have a name like Rodriguez.
Come here, slide over. Stay out of the corner.
Mr. Brian David, 30 years of service to the company. And Mr. Matt Donnelly, 35 years.
We gotta find something we can name after this. Stand up.
Get centered underneath, part of the anchor. There we go.
Matt, if you don't mind holding.
We'll just get in between us.
Heads in between our bodies. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Can I have Dan come up, please?
All right,
Mr. Ham.
Dan Hanley.
So we also announced the employee of the quarter. Before I announce the name, I'd like to share what was written. And I also have the director of the department who also submitted for this employee as well. This employee worked to resolve residents' concerns with water quality. He worked with Infomart to find solutions, flushing hydrants, using artesian wells instead of a raceway, followed up with every resident as well as tracked complaints to find troubled areas. This employee was pulled in 1,000 different directions and kept residents and quality at top priority. This is on behalf of an employee that submitted for this employee from the finance department, recognizing this employee. And I don't know if you want to mention what you're.
Let me tie in. Let me tell you what I know about Mark. There you go. He's been involved in the town of construction since 1978. And when utilities go bad, this is what I learned being director for like 13, 14 years. It goes bad unannounced and it goes way bad real fast. What happens in this situation is just about the water quality, but just in general, we can have leaks. We've had, towers fail, stuff like that. When that happens, he gets right in the middle of this one. He will live this. He will live it. He will live these moments. He'll see what's out there. He's involved. He'll flush in the middle of the night. Times ain't the factor for him, whatever it takes to solve the problem. He gets really into this, and his dedication, it's even hard to describe his dedication, because when something goes things, he will totally focus to figure out he'll do everything possible to solve his problem. So, I mean, I can talk about this one right here for, just about the water we had over the summer, but I can name a number of projects who've done the same thing. The town is very fortunate to have him. He's a great resource. He's a great guy. And that's why I just make sure I'm glad he got nominated for this award. I nominated for the same thing. So the third quarter, I'd like to present the award to Mark Turnbull.
Come on down, get a smile with us. You don't get a picture. Here, get you and Dan together. We'll get you and Dan together, bud. We're working together.
I'm going to.
Perfect, thank you.
So if I did my math correctly, that's 46 years for Mark. 46 years here at the town of Elkton. And, Mark, I might get you to comment on this if I could, because I think it's time to kind of bring a little closure to this water quality situation we had. So I'm going to try my best to explain it, and then you add in where I make my mistakes. Okay, so I guess we had unseasonably really warm weather quicker than ever in Cecil County in the state of Maryland. So what we found after quite a bit of effort was that, the town of Elkton, we pull water from 3 different sources. We got it from the groundwater, we also pull it from the Big Elk Creek, and we also have an interconnect with Artesian. So all 3 of these feed, and they fill up our water towers, they fill up our reservoir and so forth. And what we were going through, just like overnight, you would turn your spigot on it in your home and it would smell like soil, like dirt. And yet we're treating this like we've always treated it, but the water would smell earthy is the word. And the actual word is what, Michelle?
Geosmin.
Geosmin. It's a condition that's created when you have a little bit too much algae in the system. And when I say the system, our Big Elk Creek was so full of algae because of the weather early on, and you just can't kill that algae. I mean, it's just not an easy thing to do. So after, I know for day in, day out, Mark and his team was going out flushing hydrants the best that we could to try to get that taste. It wasn't really the taste, it was the smell. The water tasted fine, but trying to get it through the system. And we finally, at the end of the day, we shut off the Big Elk Creek. And we determined that was where the major cause of all the algae was. And we used additional water from Artesian, which I want to stress, that's one of the most important parts of an interconnect, that you can do these things in these times of what you call a crisis, because it was a crisis. And we continue to pull water from the groundwater. I think we're over it now.
I've been in the complaints in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's been very good.
We're still sampling.
And I can tell you, my home was hit as strong as anyone else's houses. I know that it seemed like it was everything, I guess, toward the Delaware line. But listen, I thank you and your team and for making this work out. Anyone that was affected by it certainly feels a lot better today than they did 7-8 weeks ago.
I do have a question.
Yep.
At what point did we go back to using the Elk Creek, and how long has it been?
We've been using it now for at least a month. But at a slower rate, we're only pumping half of what we were. We raised our rates at our wells to make up the difference. We used artesian for a while extra, we're back to the normal on that now, and it's been pretty good. So that's a good-
How long were we off of the Elk Creek?
Probably 4 days, it wasn't long. It wasn't long. And so we got some samples back, we see more.
Right.
And-
You have
Just slowing it
to,
down helped.
that was not a harmful.
Oh, no, it was
No, no.
absolutely not harmful.
It
No,
made
we're-
it sound like it was the,
No, it was not harmful to anyone's consumption. It can be, but it was just the smell of earthy glass of water, right? And what we've done to make sure that this doesn't happen again is we're allowing water to flow through the system a little bit to get it moving, correct?
Good to down the raceway, yes.
And that water is coming from the Big Elk Creek, so it's not costing, it's a non-treated water.
Right,
Very good, thank you.
thank you.
Did you notice he didn't have to correct me too many times there? Okay, Delmarva update. Christina Brown, are you here? Or online, maybe?
Maybe she, there with. Oh.
I don't see her on there. Well, we'll come back if she shows up. All right. So we're gonna have a presentation from Brad Krillo. Brad, come on up, with Aspen Property Management. It's a Buttonwoods, for kind of a proposal. So, you know, we've had this ongoing Buttonwoods, about the parking and so forth, even including, we have a lot of, let's say that, let me just put it bluntly, we have some challenges in that, area. Parking is a major one. And it's all stemmed from the homeowner, or the, I guess it would be the homeowners association going defunct. I don't know how many years ago that has been. But to put it in a nutshell, when those people, when I say those people, when the folks bought their homes at Buttonwoods, they all, the association owned the parking and all the land around it. When the association went under, which was about how many years ago? Does anyone have an idea? 15 years ago, 20 years ago? The town is now in charge of maintaining that parking area, the landscaping, the grass cutting of that. And it's just the way it is. I wish that we could develop a homeowner association to manage that again. But the fact is, the folks at Buttonwoods, they will not want to pay any additional dollars to have this done. Now, there's things that we can act as a team here or a board to change that. And I made a promise to one or two of the residents of Buttonwoods when they were in here that I'm not going to give up on this parking issue and or the surrounding areas. I personally have gone out there multiple times, and quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed that we own that parking lot because it's not in the greatest of shape. The landscaping looks pretty shabby. I think there's some things that we can do to make that all look better. But doing that, I brought in an expert, which and I truly call Brad Krillo an expert when it comes to this. And I'm going to ask him to give a little bit of his background and so forth. But this is what he does for a living. And I've asked him to give us a plan that maybe we can use moving forward to bring the Buttonwoods community together. So Brad, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm the president of Aspen Property Management. We've been doing this for, we've been in business since 2006. So our sole business is community management.
So sorry.
Community management, which means we manage homeowners associations, maintenance corporations, and condo communities in Maryland and Delaware. Our current portfolio is about 65 different communities with just under 14,000 units under management within the portfolio. So what that means is we manage the day-to-day operations of all the communities. So in a community, in an association setting, they have a board of directors. In this case, it would look kind of like you. So we work for the board of directors and we implement policies and procedures and standards for each community. And each community has their individual needs. So we have managers that manage a specific portfolio and manage the needs of the community. So we handle everything from billing, the due structure, we budget, do their budgets. We hire contractors to take care of open space. We do reserve studies, in condo communities, it's a much more detailed situation. Buttonwoods is like an association where, we would manage the expectations of the community. In this case, Mayor Alt came to me and asked, do we have experience in doing parking? And, in associations, they usually call the issues the 3 Ps. It's parking, paint, and poop, right? So you got to deal with those things in association. So parking is something that we deal with every day. So I put a team member of mine and we went out to Buttonwoods. We came in, we met with the mayor, we met with Michelle, we met with Dan, looked at the plans that you have in place, kind of tried to understand what the town would be looking for. And what we did is we came up with a proposal. We looked at it in 2 different ways. One was to design and implement a parking plan and a strategy with first of all, the plan, the implementation, and then developing an enforcement policy. So the town has some unique abilities that associations don't, and that would all have to be kind of fleshed out with the town and your staff to make sure we're doing everything that we need to be doing, and we dot all the T's or cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and make sure that plan will be effective and enforceable. So the proposal that I gave has the parking policy proposal to put that together. I didn't really put a number on it because I don't know exactly how many meetings, what it'll take. I put in a not to exceed number for that, to put that together. And the way I envision that working would be I would schedule a series of meetings with a couple people from my staff that specialize in parking, mainly the condo section of our business. They do a lot of parking passes and permits and designing how that works. The good news is the town, and I think Dan has already put a lot of effort into trying to lay that out. So you have a good start on how to do that. We would review that a little bit and make sure that works. And then once the town, if you guys put your stamp of approval, I'd envision you'd want us to come to a meeting with the Buttonwoods community and present and answer questions on the parking strategy. And then as part of that development, we would want to talk about enforcement. How do you enforce that? So that's the biggest component of a parking policy is how do you enforce it? And that varies. You have probably more tools in your toolbox to enforce parking than the normal association. But we can talk about that if you'd like to move forward with the parking plan, the parking proposal. The second proposal I gave was kind of to give you an idea on what it would take to kind of manage the community. So we would sit and we could take calls, we could take deal with the Buttonwoods issues and report to you as the board. And then, we could answer questions. We would meet with your board on a quarterly or monthly basis, whatever we determine. And the way we structure those kinds of contracts are on an hours per month basis. So when we met with Michelle, I asked, how many hours a month do you put in? And it's difficult to quantify that. So based on your meetings and looking at the minutes, kind of talking, to Rob and a couple other people, there are some issues at the beginning that you're trying to work through. So our proposal that we put together for the management of it, now the management would take care of what Rob was just saying. If, we would assess, we bring in contractors to assess the the roads. There are a lot of areas that need to be repaired. We don't need to bring in contractors. We could use, we could work with Dan or not. We can totally, so we can do it independent of your departments and just report to you guys. We would create an RFP to take care of the landscaping. So we would work with the commissioners or whoever your liaison would be to us to develop an RFP for, what do you want it to look like? The planting plan, do you want plants? Do you want flowers? Do you want, how do you want the entrances to look, the common area, mowing schedules? And also we could add in, if need be, we can add in a stormwater management plan. Sid does a great job though. So, we could work with him to implement some strategies. So I think the idea was that, there's a lot going on in the town from what I gather. But if we could help, alleviate some of the pressure, and manage some of the, expectations and manage, what you guys are looking for at Buttonwoods, it could be a good case study for other areas that you might have, and for us, we're kind of excited because it would be a case study to see how it worked. So with that, I mean, that's kind of the baseline. I'm happy to answer questions. I do want to say that if we were to do something, we would want input. We want to sit down and have input and understand the roles of everybody. I mean, you guys have a large staff and a lot of departments, but
What do you do now? You currently manage Washington Woods in town. You manage Patriots Glen in town. Give me an example of what you guys do. And I know that's for a fee to them, but how do you work with the town if there is a violation?
so there's twofold, right? In an association town relationship, we actually enforce deed restrictions and covenants that are subordinate to town zoning ordinances. So, and sometimes they're more restrictive. So our role in that is we do inspections monthly. We drive through the community, we take kind of video, and we enforce, like a code enforcement officer, we enforce their covenants, and we send letters, we follow up there, we work with the community to have an enforcement policy, whatever that might be. We have the software to be able to hit parameters. For example, if there's a violation, and we send an initial notice, 30 days later, you want a second notice, 30 days after that, you want another notice, and maybe 90 days after that, it goes certified and tells them that it will go to an attorney for an injunction or something like that. And we do use attorneys that we do that in some communities, and it really varies. So Washington Woods specifically, we do very little there. The board president does most of it, and that's really because she's done it for so long. Patriots Glen, we're involved every day. We take calls, any complaints with the association that are association property, we can handle. We'll take care of.
And give me an example of that.
So at Patriots Glen, they have the pool and the tennis court and the playground. We manage those. There's a lot of vandalism, trash, lights out. We would take those calls. We would schedule a contractor or send one of our maintenance team.
If someone's working on their car in their driveway, does that car come to you?
It would come to us, and it would depend on what our rules and regulations could do. I know that at Patriots Glen specifically, we've worked on 2 issues in the past, 5 years or so, that have escalated to working between the 2 of us, because there's some things that we can do, and they're on lot HOA issues, but then there's a line where the streets are not owned by the association. So we have to traverse that and understand, where the violation is at. If there's a provision that someone couldn't work on their car, I'll use that example. What would happen in that case is if someone was working on their car when we drove through today, we would probably note that. And then the next time we drove through, it would be on our drive list. It would be keyed into our system. And every time we go, we kind of have, our managers have a tablet that shows outstanding issues to look at through our software. And if we got there the second time and that violation, that car was still on jacks or whatever it was in the driveway, if there was a violation of the documents, we would send a letter.
Is this a patented software or is this something?
It is, it's something we pay for. It's a subscription. We pay monthly for it. It's industry specific to associations, so
I was gonna say.
each owner has their own login and portal. So they can have access to their documents, their account balances, their violations, their service requests, architectural requests. Another thing in associations that they have to get approval to do alterations to their home. So when they submit that, that goes on to their portal and they do that. In a Buttonwood situation, you could have the portal, but there would be really no financial kind of thing, but it would be a place that people could go and log into their own account and see what, if they've submitted a service request, there would be some coordination. We'd have to figure out what that looks like, but the communication that portal brings is pretty phenomenal.
So using the Buttonwoods, that's why we're here. In a HOA that is active, and you were saying the covenants of the deeds, there's still deeds with the Buttonwoods community.
I didn't dig too deeply into, you say it went defunct and.
Yeah.
And the enforceability of their declaration and covenants and restrictions, I don't know.
You think all that
Because it's
goes
been
away
so-
then?
So long. I don't know. We'd
Okay.
have to get a legal opinion on that, but what would happen in that situation is you have a town code. So we would treat, your code as our covenants in an association. So the codes would be entered into our system as whatever the violations were, and they would follow the prescribed plan for you.
So now
Yeah.
you become our enforcement officer.
Essentially, that would be
This
some of
is
that.
where I was getting a little confused, because I know you're operating under a homeowners, where you exist now.
Yeah,
And
it's,
the only thing we have out in Buttonwoods is our codes.
yes. In that particular situation, you have a code enforcement officer too. I mean,
Right.
if there would be, if you wanted us to do that, we could work specifically in Buttonwoods or whatever you wanted to do. To work to, they could potentially have access to the system that we use. I don't know. We would have to, I haven't thought much beyond what it would take to manage. I realize that this is the first time that you guys are hearing from us and some of the possibilities. So really, it's an open-ended discussion that you have resources that communities don't have that make it much more effective, frankly. But we could be used as far as a code enforcement, kind of like you're talking, or we could just be a consultant to say, you want us to draft an RFP, you want us to do the parking. That's kind of why I broke it up into two proposals. The management of it is ongoing monthly, so we would have to figure out how to deal with parking calls and where do they go? You have a whole staff here. Do they go and get routed to us somehow, or, do we put our number on the sign or whatever we would do? It's kind of this would be a true pilot. So, so we're happy to be involved at whatever level or not. I think you have some unique issues that we happen to see in our industry every day. Some of the things that you guys hear from the Buttonwoods community, they're not unique to any other community. We bring some of that experience. We could bring any level of service that you're looking for. I think one of the main reasons I'm interested in doing it and kind of talking to you is, one, we started Aspen and Elkton. I'm here. I could be a good resource to helping out, but also it's exactly what I've done for a majority of my business life. So,
So how, when you talk about enforcement, you talk about driving through the different areas, so one of the problems I know that Buttonwood has are issues that occur at nighttime. So with your company, how do you delineate between the issues you have during the day and the issues you have at night, and night being totally different than the day.
So we're not law enforcement, right? So anything that would be, you know, a neighbor to neighbor dispute or theft or, you know, anything like that would be directed, they would be told to call the police. Those are things that would need the police. So, if there's a complaint about, you know, I'm trying to think what would be a night, critters in the open space, right? Some animals coming from the open space, getting into the trash can, but, you know, that's happened. What do we do with that? Well, we bring somebody in to figure out what the animals are, you know, but night, if I missed the question, night issues, meaning like
Like
illegal
issue,
stuff.
something like parking, you know, I work, I come home, this spot is supposed to be mine, someone else is pulled in there.
Parking specifically, I can talk to. So parking, the parking issues at night, when someone comes home and someone's parked in their spot or they can't find a spot and they're gonna take somebody else's spot and it creates this whole issue. So there's a couple ways that we deal with it. One is we hire a towing company and the towing company has the authority given by the town or the community. We sign an agreement and we leave it as an open tow because, you know, if we would implement the parking policy, that would have some sort of delineation of their space where they should be. And if a towing company comes out and they don't have the proper permit or whatever that would be, they could tow. That's really what we've done in the past. At condos, that's what we do all the time. You know, at every intersection, there's a sign that says, you know, this is monitored, whatever the law is to sign for towing. And, you know, it becomes if you have a specific spot, if your spot, if it is not permitted appropriately, it's we tow. And that has worked very well. And frankly, it takes 3 or 4 to get towed and then everybody understands that it's real, right? You know, everybody gets a permit, but you know, so those are issues. Those are kind of if we were to develop a parking plan, we would need to talk about those to make sure, you know, we're comfortable with it. And, you know, we do take the calls of you towed my car, you know, and I want it back. So realistically, you know, those calls go to the towing company and the towing company works it out because there's a clear policy. And that's where I think if you're going to move down the path of a parking policy, you need to have a very clear, thought out policy and then communicate it effectively, and then the implementation of that. And that's kind of the first proposal I gave you. So the parking is probably the bane of your existence at night, and you know, people kind of going back and forth, and it's very cut and dry. You have your own spots, and that's how I would see it working there. I think the plan I saw had particular numbers that go to particular houses, and you know, we would have to just make sure, and the way you do that is as fair as possible, as close as possible. We had some ideas when we looked at the plan and creating more space to get closer if there were issues. So those are all things that would be part of our proposal to create a parking policy or plan.
And of course, parking some, because again, a lot of places, people want to be creatures of habit. So everybody wants to park right in front of their door, which is impossible in many instances. And I guess it's a matter of convincing, you know, people that, you know, you're assigned to spots in these doors that, you know, you have to make do as you best can.
I think there's some level of communication in that, right? So everybody were they given 2 spots? Were they deeded 2 spots? You know, there's a difference. You know, when you're talking about parking in a development setting, you either have deeded parking spots, which are your spots as part of your property, or you have common parking spots, and common parking spots are meant to have 2 spots, but not necessarily guaranteed in front of your own. We have a large townhome community in Joppa that has always had parking issues, and you know, it ebbs and flows, I will say. You know, some people want the parking policy now because they're affected. So you implement the parking policy and other people don't want it. So, you know, like, you got to make sure you set clear expectations and have, you know, what the outcome you want to be, you gotta stick with it. And, so we do have those issues. We have houses that were built on flag lots that people have to walk. Even if you were to park them as close as possible, they have to walk, 50 yards to their front door. So those people get one spot, and, we figured out a pretty reasonable way. And part of that, is, some reasonableness from the homeowner as well. And we found that, I would say, 95% of the conversations that we have with homeowners that don't, agree with the spots they get are workable. That it's that 5% that create the challenge, which makes this a headache for a lot of people to deal with. So, that's part of what we do.
How does the new person that, let's use, it's a rental. And, you have a new person to the neighborhood moves in. How do we educate that person? How do you do that? Do you work well with the landlords, I guess, or
I
the
mean, we would, that's difficult, and that's difficult in community management too. So I'll relate it to a new homeowner.
Okay.
So, someone sells their home, a new person comes to the home, they don't know where their trash can comes or whatever they need to know, and they don't know the parking procedures, and they'd like to know how to get the pool passes. Those, we actually create a welcome package for each person. So we would work with, when they sell the home, right, we give a resale disclosure that has this information in it. And then if they call us, we'll send it. And then when it transfers, we'll send another welcome package. In this case, I would say that there's going to be some education to the landlords to say, here's the piece of paper that you have to give your new tenant so they can get their information. And in the parking policy, they're going, the landlord would be responsible for the passes. And that's the same in community management, whether it's a rental or not. The owner of the property is entitled to the parking passes, and they can give them to their tenants as they see fit. And if they're lost or stolen or whatever, there's a fee, and then they pay to get their parking passes, and it's just an administrative process. But to answer your question, I would envision some education to the rental owners, and then really the communication on the parking policy would go to the owner of record, and then
Probably through the finance department.
Yeah,
When
whatever you're doing,
when they
yes.
record their deed automatically, right? Like,
I would be interested to, and something I don't know is how many are owned and how many are rented. And,
yeah,
You
well,
know-
any owner's gonna have to come in and record their deed or pay their fees and sign up, right? At the finance department, they could get that welcome letter or package that.
But how does that work now with the passes?
At this point, they only administer term requests. And so.
Oh, we don't, that's right, we don't do it in Buttonwoods.
And that being said, just a quick question. So Buttonwoods is public property, the parking spaces, the job the town may be referring to.
Same.
It's
owned by Alfred County.
Okay.
So we and even though it's owned by Harford County, handicap accessibility, signage, we do that. So that the county reaches out to us, and the association has to pay for that. It's different though. In Harford County and Cecil County are different jurisdictions. So, we talked about that. I'm not 100% sure. The implementation of that, someone owns those parking spots. I would imagine it's the town of Elkton.
Okay.
So it's not a matter, so the town of Elkton would have the ability to implement a parking policy even better than, where an association overlays, like Harford County, the association overlays the parking spots. So we're responsible for it in our declarations, but they're still in effect. So there is some work there, but with there's some things that we would have to vet out to make sure that it is proper, and we're doing the right thing. But a parking plan is something that will take some time. But
As you said, it's a pilot.
yeah, I mean the parking we could make that fairly streamlined. I think if you, the true pilot for us would be in the management stuff, the code enforcement, if that works, and you know, what would that look like and how do you do that? You brought up a good point, you know, the town probably gets better records of a property transfer because of water bills. And though we get, HUD-1 settlements, so when they settle, they usually send them to us and we lag 90 days. But, you know, there's a mechanism that you have in the water bill change that can say, hey, this changed. Send a welcome package and that triggers that package to go out. In our system, that's what happens. So if we change an owner of record, though that owner, our system automatically drafts a new letter, a new welcome package that gets printed overnight, and we have staff that come in and send those out. You know, I don't know, in that portfolio, there's probably 10 a day.
Any other questions up here at the board?
I had a couple along the way, but they've all been answered.
Oh, how about that? Well, when you went out there, for your assessment, did you see a need or even the potential for additional parking?
Not initially, but as we sat down with Dan and Michelle and Rob, we kind of talked about, you know, they know where the complaints kind of are coming, where those hot spots are.
Mhm.
If we're looking at them, I think overall you have plenty of parking. There's plenty of parking out there. You guys have put in more spots,
Yeah,
but some of those spots are walking distance. So what do you do with those spots?
he decided to manage it. And the condition of the parking, like if it's gonna need curbing.
I would say the paving
Paving.
in the parking spots, especially when you go to the back right corner, it looked like there was some water line work or something that needed some work. It does need some attention.
But that would be our expense.
Yeah, it would be yours.
It would be all our expense, right? It would just be, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Landscaping. If you manage the property, it would become
Part of
your
what-
baby. Okay.
Well, you would pay for the landscaping. We would either hire a landscaper or
manage it,
we
yeah.
would manage that contract. I don't have, the proposal that I gave you doesn't contemplate paying the bill for the landscaping. We could. But we would typically, what would happen is we would create an RFP based on what you guys would like and to see the landscaping. And then we would bid that out to whoever would like to bid that. Right now, we're going through the process in all of our communities that we send RFPs through our website and we allow anybody to bid on them. So,
Because, yeah, landscaping then has to be maintained, because most of these communities you go into, they have
absolutely.
beautiful flower
Yep. And-
arrangements, and somebody's going in there and pulling those weeds, you
Yep.
know,
And there's a cost, you know, so that's
Yeah,
kind of
there's a
when,
cost.
if we were to do that, we would sit down with whoever the decision maker or whoever your liaison would be for us. We'd create an RFP based on, you know, do you want flowers in the fall and the spring, in the fall and the summer? Do you want terms of flowers? What do you want that to look like? Or do you want to spend some money and make flower beds that are perennial and then they're just maintained each year? There's a whole lot of things that we could do there. And it really comes from the direction of the boards and communities and you guys in this situation.
Currently, there's nothing in these,
Okay.
nothing.
Oh, I know. I know. Usually if the, people that live there don't get out and do it, doesn't really get done.
I mean, we see that all over, you know,
Yeah,
I live
mean,
in a
it's
community. of
them
people
cleaning
that
up
take
their
care.
yards or adjacent to their yards, making it look nicer, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, I would ask the board to take a look at these proposals, give them some thought. Reach out, next several meetings, reach out to Brad if you have any questions.
Feel free to call me anytime. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have after we leave. I mean, I understand that, you know, you might be getting hit with it now, but anybody, if you have any questions about, if you're looking for ideas, I'm here. My office is in Northeast. I'm there every day.
I was gonna say one comment.
Sure.
Not all the sections are having the same issues as like 200, 400 block, 600 block. Some of them might be fine, but, that's what my question is. How you gonna bring all of them together to do the same
Well,
thing
not,
for the 200 block or the 600 block?
I mean, the expectation, that's part of setting the expectation at the beginning. Not everybody's gonna be happy with the spot they're gonna get. You know, there's not, it's not gonna be a one size fits all answer to that. But the 200 block might need to be able, you know, you might need to stand out there and have a meeting and say, listen, what's reasonable? You know, and people might not be reasonable. And if that doesn't work, they're going to have to be assigned a spot that to someone that's not, doesn't have an interest in the spot seems to be reasonable. And that's kind of where we come in, like, you know, if you look at the situation, if you have somebody, just look at each situation. I don't really know a good answer, or example.
All right, anyone from staff have any questions, comment? Gene?
I just had a question. Frank, how many people, work for us?
We have about 15 staff members, yeah, and then we have a maintenance department that has 4. So we do, in the condos, we do a lot of small maintenance, and we have a cleaning division as well that has 2, so just under 20.
All right, thank you, Brad.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
Did you guys have the proposals?
I
brought a
do.
couple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Sure.
I think, you know, we're doing our best to try to understand, so we can do, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 neighborhoods that I think right off the bat is, you know, Buttonwoods, Delancey, and Turnquist.
Yeah.
But could be everything, could be.
Yeah, I don't know how.
And we have to work with Chip's department to see. No, well, he works with Chip's department when it comes to Patriots Land, so I think that there's an answer there.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's an answer. Yes.
Thanks, Brad.
All right, up next, Krista Brown. I think you're here, Christina Brown. Come on down.
So,
Give us an update, a
Hello.
Delmarva update.
Okay, so I don't really have any updates,
Uh-huh.
but I'm here to see if you guys can maybe update me, if you have any issues or anything that you want to bring to my attention. I know I've been in contact with Dan Hanley and I know Michelle was asking if I could come today. So I wanted to see if you guys have any updates for me.
Actually, I have a lot of questions for you.
Oh, wow.
Are you
Okay.
ready? Are you ready and ready to go?
Think so.
First and foremost question we always get, downtown, I know that, we love to put banners on these utility poles. Is the best thing to do is not to call you and just put those banners on those poles, or should we call you?
You should call me.
Okay, so that'd be good. Are you guys in contact? Perfect, okay. Very good. Because that's one of the things that we always hear is that, well, we can't do that, that's a Delmarva. If we make a phone call, it's a Delmarva pole, we can't do it. But you'll help us work a little magic, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's like different third-party agreements and attachment agreements that have to be filled out, to see what can be done and what can't be done.
Mhm.
So we can work something out.
And then, you know, from an economic development standpoint, I travel states, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. And I know in the Virginia market going up through the I-81 corridor, there's a stronger grid that they're doing a lot of data centers. My question is, I'm always being told that our grid here couldn't handle a data center. And I don't know why. What do we need to do with Delmarva to make our power better, cleaner, or whatever it may be, that we could entertain a data center into the community?
Okay.
Does that make any sense? I don't know.
It makes sense.
Gene, have you ever heard that or no?
I believe data centers, have a lot of different components to them, including not only power demands, but, I believe there's a large water demand for cooling, and they do generate a lot of noise. So we're going to be careful where you locate them.
Right on the PA lines. Yeah.
Right when that pole.
What do we do when, we see, yard sale signs on poles, political signs on poles? Are we allowed to remove those off your poles, or should we call you?
I would say just call, just in case,
We get a lot of yard sale signs. It'll be, and then they forget to take their yard sale sign
right,
after the yard sale is over.
they really shouldn't be there, so,
I just wanna make a comment. I was coming in a meeting today, and I bet you everybody's seen this, I would never notice the same thing. At the Elkton Middle School, there's a sign, there's a beautician sign, hair weaves, eyelashes, right on the first sign, the telephone sign. Right by the Elkton Middle School, coming over this bridge here.
Never noticed.
If you look, it says beautician, beauty,
It's a
anyway.
permanent sign.
It's a sign, and I mean, code enforcement, nobody noticed that, but anyway, I see it all the time, I'm just wondering, how does that sign stay there all the time?
so first we would have to see if it's really our pole. Like I know I just parked out here in front of one of our poles. I know a lot of towns have been contacting me and like saying, you guys have like wires on the poles, and they're not our wires. They're like Comcast or Verizon, or it's not our pole. So first we would just have to make sure that it's really our pole, and then I can go
gotcha.
from there. And if it is our pole, we can definitely come out and get that sign removed.
So you would need the poll number.
Yes.
Okay, so if we gave you the poll number, then are you recommending we call you or report it online somehow?
You can call me, or you can report it online, or you can call me, I can report it online.
There we go.
Isn't that a lot of work there for your staff to come out there when we could just rip them
That's
off?
our job. No,
Okay.
that's our job.
I
We
mean,
do drive-bys, and like I would come out today, I can take a look today. That's,
I had one at the end of, around the corner, at the end of our street, that I was just gonna park my car, get out and pull it off. I mean, it's, there, you can tell they're just stapled up there.
yeah,
I mean. You can't do that?
no.
Okay. I didn't do it.
Well, listen, you got the answer now. We got the answer. Christina, we're gonna call you and then we're gonna wear your phone out. So just,
To change that policy later
Ju-
on, you might.
well, just to make sure everyone, you have to have the poll number and then they'll come out
So
and handle it.
your poles will have a number on.
Yes, it's actually gonna have two sets of numbers. So like one and then another set. So like about 5 digits on each set of numbers.
And easily visible.
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't have any number. on your
Probably
phone.
not. But you can also email me like the address. I can look it up in our system and see what whose poll was. It's not ours.
Or send those numbers to Michelle.
Yeah.
But also just FYI, as we call the phone number on the sign.
They're told to
And
come
say,
down.
this is a courtesy call. I realize you're just trying to do the business,
Right.
and we understand that. But please remove the sign.
I like that idea too.
Yeah, that seems a good.
Very good. Is there any other questions from Christine?
One of the things I ran into initially in the building, on number 4, I was going to have Delmarva extend the three-phase service down Frenchtown Road. But I found that all those poles are Verizon poles, and Delmarva has lines on the Verizon poles, so they had to go through theoretically through Verizon to do that, but then Southfield decided on three-phase service with Southfield, so I abandoned that effort. But that's an example of how Verizon actually shared poles with Delmarva or Comcast or other providers.
Gene, you had a comment?
Your fines associated with folks posting signs on your poles,
No,
your fines.
no. I know, we don't have anything in place like for fines, but I know like we've seen a lot of where they're hanging banners and they've like broke our poles, and then we have to come out and fix the broken pole. We're like, wait, we weren't supposed to do this. Please do it the correct way next time. So I don't know if in the future they may have something in place, but as of right now.
Very good. Any other questions from the board? Christina, thank you.
All of that.
So,
Oh,
Maybe, or can I, for other matters, I would signage or poles, like, basically for our building, I have questions about it.
Yes, so, I can, it depends on what it is, like, I can look into our system, but if it's like customer service, then I'm made just directly to customer service, but
Yeah, well, I was asking because what I'm asking is probably a little bit, more intricate than just, the bill itself. It's some other type of questions, but it's a relationship building.
okay.
So yeah, if maybe somebody, I don't know if you guys do sort of, say a relationship manager or something.
So I would be like the relationship manager. So we do have like a large commercial customer like team who works on like specific towns. They're responsible for that, like the billing in that aspect, but I can look at it first and see if I can, then I can dig deeper.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Tamika, for that, 'cause that slipped my mind. I know what you're thinking.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, no worries.
I know what you're thinking.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have a presentation on Elkton drainage assessment of the Big Elk Creek and flood studies for impact areas. Verdantes, come on down.
There are a few copies of the slides if anybody. They can't see the screen well once.
Good afternoon, Mayor Commissioners and town staff. Thanks again for having us here today. I'm James Taylor from Verdantis. With me is Gina Khan, who we've been working on the Big Elk Creek drainage assessment. We were in front of you back in July. At the very beginning of the study, it was a very fast study, but we're now here at the end of the study, and so we wanted to kind of debrief of where we ended up with the report and where things are at today. Just kind of provide some additional stuff for the future. So just as a reminder of where we were at, so the purpose of the study the study was funded by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources grant. And the purpose here was to kind of assess the flood risk along Big Elk Creek and identify some feasible, permittable and fundable mitigation strategies for some of the flooding that has been occurring. And then as part of that, we wanted to prepare some concept plans that could be shared to support future grant applications, because we know the funding associated with this to be able to do some of these is a very important part of it. So there were 3 steps as part of this. The first step was conducting the drainage and flood assessment. Then it was prioritizing the flood impact areas and what might be some potential solutions. And then the third step was kind of paring that down. There's a lot of solutions that are out there. We wanted to provide the town with 3 realistic conceptual designs that could proceed forward for flood impact. So I'm going to send this over to Gina to keep going.
Thanks, James. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about the flood risk analysis that we did. We have a very long report that we just completed, so we're trying to condense this down into a short presentation. So hopefully this will make sense. So one of the key findings of our study pertains to sediment and debris. So there is an excessive amount of sediment, debris and debris in the stream, particularly at stream bends and at bridges, like at the structures that cross the creek. And this debris forms blockages, and it really reduces the conveyance in the stream. It reduces, the amount of flow that can move through there. And what else it does is slow the velocity of the water that's coming through, which kind of exacerbates the cycle and makes more sediment and debris deposit. The real big impact of this is on the smaller storms, the storms that happen every 1 to 2 years, even the 10-year flood. The heights of those floods are really exacerbated by all of this debris and sediment that's in the stream. The other thing I'll note is that 85% of this sediment is coming from land, but from the whole watershed, which goes up into Cecil County and up into Chester County, Pennsylvania. And then about 15% of it is from erosion along the stream banks. Again, not just in Elkton, but upstream. So a few of the kind of specific issues, the kind of the key flood issues we noted, just to make it easier, we broke the study area down into kind of 3 sub areas. So our first area is Main Street and upstream around the Elkton Dam and a little bit further upstream. So the issues we noted there were debris accumulation at the bridge, at the dam, on the fish ladder, debris and sediment, and then there is actually an area there that's intended to collect sediment, and then like a bypass channel. Those are fully encased in sediment, fully pretty much non-functional because of the amount of sediment that's deposited there. So, this impacts fish passage at the dam and could potentially threaten the intake to the water treatment plant if it continues to accumulate. And then there are some stream bank erosion issues too in that section of the study. Then the second area was Delaware Avenue. We see flooding of the roadway at Delaware Avenue where it crosses the creek, flooding in Meadow Park. A lot of sediment deposition, particularly at that bridge at Delaware Avenue. And, when there's a storm, the water comes out of the creek, then you've got sediment depositing, in the channel, but also on the road and in the park areas. And then also flood waters entering the water treatment plant, which is adjacent to Delaware Avenue there. Then our third area is down around the Bridge Street crossing and Howard Street. And we noted that the businesses that are on Main Street that back to Howard Street experience flooding in their lower level on a fairly frequent basis. There's also flood damage to commercial properties on Bridge Street. And then flooding and sedimentation in the parklands, the ball fields, et cetera, in that area there. Once we sort of identified the flooding problem, our next step was to kind of identify a wider range of mitigation measures and then, select from those. So in that first area, that area 1, up around the dam, our first suggested mitigation measure is to remove excess sediment and debris at the bridge and up and through the dam there. We recommend channel improvements to inhibit the deposition. And essentially what this would be is, along with removing the sediment, changing the grading in the channel a little bit to make a low flow channel that will keep velocities moving and keep the sediment moving through the stream. Basically condensing the flow into a channel so that it lessens the amount of sediment that's going to be depositing on a regular basis. We recommend some method of sediment diversion and capture, which we determined, it's a little hard to see on the slide. There's almost like a little circle area in the middle there. You can see that's an area that had been designed to trap sediment. So our mitigation measure there would be to restore it to its design condition and then maintain it going forward so that.
Where is that?
That's a diversion dam.
Correct.
Where?
Yeah.
Okay.
The triangle is there,
Yeah.
behind my house.
Yeah, triangle in the middle. The picture on the bottom left-hand corner is a picture of what that looks like today. Maybe a little bit ago, but
Do you mean where it separates?
yes. Yeah, where it goes around the island. Yeah.
There,
Oh, wow.
And then, on the slide there, you can see those kind of little yellow lines I highlighted. Those are 2 areas where we would recommend stream bank stabilization projects to protect the bank, but also to reduce the amount of sediment that's washing into the stream. The lower one you see there is an area where there's some residential properties that are experiencing significant erosion that could threaten, the property, the house, maybe a driveway. The other one is a residential property where there's just a lot of erosion and potentially sediment entering the stream. It's not really threatening a house or anything there. It's an area where it's sort of like mowed like right up to the bank. It's not really ideal for maintaining that stream bank. just, so the circle was showing you that we're recommending all of those options, of the ones that we, identified. So then, in the second area, this is the area around Delaware Avenue. Our suggested mitigation options are to restore the full bridge conveyance, removing all of that sediment and debris that's deposited. Again, I know these pictures are a little hard to see, but the one in the bottom there is a picture of that bridge. There's really a lot of material that's accumulated there. Again, we are recommending some improvements to the channel that would help inhibit the sediment deposition going forward. Another mitigation measure could be to raise the bridge, which would help reduce the amount of debris that accumulates there and would also elevate the level of the roadway so that it wouldn't be underwater as much. The water treatment plant is impacted by water that backs up behind this bridge. So another mitigation measure could be to protect the water treatment plant with berms or flood walls that would keep the water out of it. And then where you see that yellow line on the map there, I know it's a little hard to see, but that is an area that in the park that is prone to excessive erosion and is an area we would recommend for stream bank stabilization. So in evaluating the options here, we felt like there were a few options that should be prioritized first. So that would be restoring the bridge conveyance, doing the channel improvements, and doing that stream bank stabilization. And then the other measures, certainly could be needed in the future, but would be a sort of a second, intermediate step. All right, so the third area, this is down near Park and Bridge Street, Howard Street. We had another set of mitigation measures there. So just like the other two areas, there's a lot of sediment that has deposited around the bridge there. I know this picture is hard to see, but the bridge opening at Bridge Street is sort of, I would say 30, maybe 40% blocked right now. You can see, yeah, it's a little hard to see in the picture.
Yeah, basically, it's very tough to see, but essentially this is the middle of the bridge right here.
Good.
The land starts right here.
Yeah.
Almost right next to that middle of the bridge.
I guess the other one is so bad,
Yeah.
it makes this one look good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say too, this one is, the way it has grass on it, right? It might look like it's meant to be there, but it is taking away, area under the bridge that could convey flood waters.
Okay.
So once again, we would recommend improvements to the channel, a low flow channel that would help, a low flow channel that would help, reduce the amount of sediment that's depositing there. Other mitigation measures would be to add additional conveyance. So if you clear out that area under the bridge, and want a further reduction in flood heights, there could be the potential to put some high flow relief culverts under the bridge, which essentially would, create more conveyance area under the bridge. Or sort of a more extensive project. You can see those messily drawn purple lines on the sketch there, would be to create basically a high flow like diversion channel that would be able to carry additional floodwaters from the stream and kind of bypass that area and connect downstream. Another set of alternatives would be to protect specific structures and assets. So one option would be to raise Howard Street and raise the street itself. That would raise the elevation of the roadway to make it less likely to flood. And it would also protect the structures behind it. It would almost be creating like a barrier in between the stream and the commercial properties there. If as a sort of another option, similarly, there could be a berm or structure created in those parking lots along Howard Street that would create a barrier between the stream and those commercial properties.
There would have to be a berm where there's a ballpark is.
Yeah, on the other side of the road, so there's a lot of parking, there's a lot of, paved areas back there, owned by many different property owners. This is not, it's not a,
On the other side of Howard Street, so you got the ball fields on the side closest to the creek. Howard Street would be there, and then it would be utilizing those existing parking lots. Kind of on the Main Street side of Howard Street.
But for a berm to be effective, it would need to be continuous.
so you would tie into you would tie into high elevations, at either end. So it would be a long berm, kind of parallel to Howard Street that would
Yeah.
continue until it connects to the high grade.
But the street would still be,
The street would still be down in that alternative, yes.
how high would a berm have to be?
Well, it depends on, what level of protection you want. I mean, you're not gonna be able to protect from a 100-year storm with a berm, most likely without, the height would be too high there, but you could potentially put in something that would protect from the 10-year storm.
It's not unusual at all. I mean, it happens probably once or more a year here. Ours out back to be completely submerged. So you're looking at least 5 feet. I've seen 7.
Yeah, so it's a lot. I mean, there's, again, these are all options that we were going through and saying, hey, these are things that could be done, but the cost associated with it is a lot higher, right? And so, as we go through these, you'll see, I mean, there's some things that immediately can be done to help reduce the flooding. But there's things that projecting out long-term also need to be thought of to be able to say, hey, in order to make sure we're thinking of this as we go forward, we need to start planning for these items. So again, this was an item that was talked about, but not necessarily an action item that we're saying right now. And that kind of goes into the third piece, which is the levee or the berm alongside the channel, where, it's gonna be difficult because of the ball fields. Like, we don't wanna impact where the ball fields are and trying to get that in. So there is some complication with that as well. So no matter, on a lot of these things, there are gonna be property impact at some point down the line. The question is gonna be, to what degree?
Can you raise Howard Street enough?
So, yeah, I think we noted, at the very lowest point, if you wanted to protect that road to get it to stay dry in a 10-year storm, you'd have to raise it 6 feet at the lowest point. But yeah, it's substantial. It's not, adding 6 or 12 inches of asphalt. It's more
Like a
substantial.
minimum of 6 feet.
And then,
Yeah, the lowest point, yes.
and then at that point, you're causing, how do you get into Eater Park to get access to the ball fields? Because so there's all that trickle down that has to be identified further.
It's a berm was discussed many years ago, and as a guideline to some of the things we're saying now, it's probably more costly now than would be what was discussed previously.
I think our biggest, one of our challenges that we had when we did the study in the late 90s was that the ball fields, we had nowhere to take 12, 13, 1,400 kids at that time and where to take them. And today that's changed. It's changing today. One being that the Little League attendance is down to 400 or 500 people. And then hopefully, if it comes to fruition, we'll have a sports complex, which you'll be able to relocate. That would be my goal, to relocate. And then now you have an area that you can do that.
A lot, right, exactly. If that's, coordination with the ball, with the Little League, that wasn't able to be done back in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's a huge area that's now available for flood storage, for protection, that's definitely feasible.
Yeah, so in the short term, what we're recommending, as we recommended at the other locations, is to remove that sediment that's accumulated, particularly around the bridge there, and again, do channel improvements to inhibit deposition. Yeah, so, we have it here quickly. It's gonna be hard for everybody to see this on, the printout or on the screen. We do have, engineering concept plans that we put together that highlight these improvements. Go ahead, if you go to the next one. So this, the third one here, we just put, just so you can see what the detail looks like on our plan of, you know, creating a low flow channel and removing the sediments. And, you know, this table just shows, from essentially the sediment clean out and creating that low flow channel, rough expectations of what flood height reduction might be. So, you know, in a couple of the storms, you're getting a foot and a half of reduction in some places. May not seem really extensive, but so that first column there, that 1,500 CFS storm, that's one you're probably seeing once a year. You know, the projects we proposed in that storm would make Delaware Avenue passable. So you could drive across it, so it wouldn't have water standing on it in that particular storm. And it would keep the water out of those buildings that back to Howard Street and two of the commercial buildings along Bridge Street. So, you know, although the flood reductions aren't huge, they're enough to make a difference in those more regular storms that are happening.
So does this take into, does this take into consideration these concepts, the fact that it's also exacerbated by high tide? So, and then also the idea of, is this based upon making the water move faster? Is that the whole idea here, that the water to move quicker, so you got less deposits?
So the idea is in sort of your regular days or your small precipitation events, this gets the water to move faster and to kind of be confined to this low flow channel so it's not spreading out real wide and kind of depositing sediment everywhere. In the storm events, what it does is it opens up conveyance. So basically have more area in the stream for that water to flow through versus, you know, your stream's all blocked up with sediment and debris. The water's coming out of the banks more frequently up onto the roads, you know, up to property. So those are the main things that are going to issues.
And would that be an ongoing, having to remove the silt on a regular basis, you know, as well?
Right, and I mean, I'm not sure when the last time sediment's been removed from, or, you know, from that entire section of Big Elk Creek that is in the town. So as the years go on, the more sediment that deposits, the worse it's getting. The goal here is to get it to a smaller area of maintenance versus having to do the entire channel maintaining year after year.
So, but it also takes into consideration the time of flood.
Yes.
I guess, I'm gonna just ask. So I'm looking at it, looks like about $5.2 million in costs. And that's, not including, of course, like land acquisition costs and so forth, the kind of the unknowns. But am I reading this correctly? That for $5.2 million, less the other costs, we believe that this would knock out up to a 10-year storm. Looking at your data here. Now I see the 100-year storm. And you mentioned that, but what we have in town is, I've always said we've had the 5-year nuisance flood 4 times a year, right? And that's kind of how it's been tracking.
Right.
But if you told me that would knock out those type of floods, that's huge for us.
Yeah, I mean, going back to this here, right, the 1,500 is the one that we kind of compared this to. You're still gonna have some, but it definitely is reducing the flood level by almost 2 feet. And again, these are very rough estimates. Once you start getting into defined, defined analysis even further, once you have good concepts or more than just concepts, but engineered plans, it can shrink that down even, or make that number even to about more.
The question on, I'm looking here at the next steps.
Mhm.
And, is your engineering company, capable of designing? You're your engineering firm, are you capable of reaching out to get these grants or help us get the grants?
Yeah, all of that. So
So it could be a turnkey operation if we were to try to move forward in some way here.
correct. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that with the grant, some grants have restrictions on if someone helps you obtain the grants, sometimes they're not eligible to do the design. But yeah, there are definitely some things out there we're able to do all the way through. So we've done the analysis, we can assist with grant. We've been talking to Gene a little bit about some things and Gene's probably one of the best, in the area of knowing what grants are out there and going after grants. But she's been great to work with through this whole thing. And then when it comes time to actually doing the full design, we're able to do all that.
And we have the agreement with what's the group from Have to Grace? Underwood, so it could almost be,
Collaborative, yep,
and
exactly,
one could bounce off the other.
correct.
Listen, I see possibly an opportunity here, maybe.
More than we've had.
I know.
Yeah, I mean,
It really is. Danielle, you had a question.
I'm very eager to talk. I'm so sorry, because I was very fortunate to be part of the work study group that we had some really in-depth discussion on all of the findings. So I know that it was a really good discussion, and we talked about some of the differences between what a 10-year flood looks like versus what we see regularly from a tracking standpoint. And to Rob's point, my concern, because you're like me, Rob, I was adding up numbers right away, going 5.2 million federal funding opportunities, we can knock this out easy. But when we're talking what Mr. Masaniano said, 7 feet of flood back there covering cars, how much is 2 feet really gonna help us? So I do think that instead of looking at dollars, I would love for us to look at, this is ideal, this is next runner up, this is what we can get by with, and then add up the dollars later, because, we've been looking at this for, Rob, it's 30 years. Now, I think I was a kid the last time the creek was dredged. And, there were so many other good long-term solutions that were discussed in that. And I just wanted to bring to your attention, I know we talked about grants, but the EPA released earlier this year an environmental and climate justice community grant program. And that's $10 to $20 million. Now, this year, we kind of missed the timing on that, but it's very likely that that will be available next year for one more go round. So I don't want us as a town to look at $5.2 million and cut ourselves short, because the other side of this is we're very lucky the Alliance has brought on to our board of directors a FEMA grant specialist who worked in the Philadelphia office for 20 years. She was at our board meeting the other day, and her knowledge and jargon and ability to be helpful with this, I would love, her first comment was, yes, get me involved. And that was kind of my idea in messaging Gene yesterday, asking for a meeting, because I didn't know this was coming up, so that was great.
Yeah.
But I would really like to explore, like, what is the ideal scenario? What fixes a 50-year flood? Because we were talking in that workshop meeting, we don't even have a record of how many times we took a roadside. And Michelle, I think that was a question we were thinking maybe you might be able to help. If there was a record, you probably know about it. But do we keep a record of every time Public Works closes?
Listen, let's finish on with the presentation and I'll come back to you.
That's fine.
All right, thank you.
And I think with that, I mean, it's a great point, right? We wanted to get some real things done that you could say tomorrow, let's go after this. I think this whole discussion related to flooding is an ongoing discussion. It can't just be we do a report, we put it on the shelves, or we have a report, we're gonna refer to it. It needs to continuously be discussed and brought up and continue to move forward, because as mentioned, yeah, we want to make sure that we put the best thing forward and are able to go after the best to be able to protect the town even further than just, hey, let's maintain it. But at the start, we got to maintain, and that's kind of what some of the examples here were, was near term, we need to get a better idea of what the stream looks like as a whole. We walked it, we used available data, but to be able to get photos of the entire thing, usually the winter is the best time to do that because you don't have the tree cover. The water is at the lowest level. You can kind of go through and do all that. So that's something that we would recommend over the next little bit. That's probably going to be the biggest outcome.
I think listen, I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't want to get this resolved. And I think that, I think one of our biggest challenges has always been, man hours, you know, how we could do it. And, I think this group up here has to make a decision whether we put a team together and let's just get this thing done, right, Gene?
So the current grant we received was sort of a short-term grant. I think, DNR had some leftover grant money and said, you can use it, you got 9 months. So that's really quick for a study like this. So they did the best they could for the amount of time they had to work on it. And it was done on time by September 30th, like they requested. The next grant round is coming up. What we were looking at with this particular study was do an analysis, give us 3 concepts, and then with those 3 concepts, I'm going to take and apply for funding for design. And I'll start with the first area, the first of the 3 concepts, and request design assistance funding for that. So you can get the in-depth engineered study done on that section of the stream, but you've got to start upstream anyway. And once that's designed, then I apply for the actual construction grants. These are separate grants. And then while I'm applying for the construction grants for area 1, I'm applying for, again, for design grants for area 2. So we'll try to keep this moving to address the
Perfect.
short-term fix, which is we need stream bank stabilization and alignment. And that would then give us a better idea as to what are the next steps for other things. We do need to flood-proof the water treatment plant. I think they end up with seepage. They use sump pumps. The building itself should be waterproof or flood-proofed. And that may be, that's something that's doable. There may be other different grant money for that. But then further down, the conveyances with the high flow channels and that sort of thing, very expensive, involves a lot of property owners. And you want to take we'll have to take a closer look at that after we address these initial 3 areas with the stream bank stabilization and that sort of thing, the low flow channels.
I would tell you that, I follow the flood control very closely and I back in the early 80s in Petersburg, West Virginia, where I have my hunting cabin, the Potomac, the south branch of the Potomac goes through there, and the flooding that, I don't know, it must have had 7 days of rain that flooded and wiped out the whole town back then. And it was after Agnes, and it was before Floyd, so I'm trying to think what storm it was, but it was a huge storm. Well, the Army Corps came in and did a flood control project, which, when you see these levees are very nice. I mean, they're spread out to where you have the, like you're saying, the channel of water here, but now you're also kind of spreading out where all the sediment goes a little bit wider, right? So you still have your channel and you want that channel there. This is where they fish for trout. I mean, they love that right there. But when the rain comes in, it spreads it out a little bit more evenly. And so going back to the comment that 2 foot over that range of, if you could imagine the whole Meadow Park area and so forth, it makes a world of difference.
It's a lot of water.
It makes a world of difference. So, listen, it sounds like we're in a game here, right? We got a game plan? Any questions from the board?
The full report is on our website, on the front page of our website, the full 100 and some page report.
Have you guys, have you witnessed one of our floods firsthand?
Yeah, I've been working with Dan since he started as public works director, been working with Gene since before that. So yeah, I've come out.
So you've seen the acreage?
Yeah,
Footage?
yeah.
Daniel, I'm sorry.
And, yeah, I appreciate you guys coming. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I've got a business that backs up to Howard Street. I've been there for 38 years.
Yeah.
So I've seen a couple of 10-year floods. I've seen a lot of floods. If you can stop them from getting in my building, that'd be great, all of our buildings.
Right.
But if I go from 4 feet in my basement to 2 feet in my basement, I'm still wet.
Right.
And we spend a lot of money and we're still wet. And as far as, I'm sorry, but as far as the sediment in the stream, yes, it's going to let the water go through faster, especially like that big island over by Meadow Park. But I remember when that island wasn't even there, it was just a little beach. There's trees on it now.
Yeah.
The flood hasn't changed.
We need to apply for permit to dredge there now. Like,
Yeah, basically, the MPE requires a whole permit process for going through. Been working with Dan on some emergency ones on like the raceway and the boat ramp in Marina Park, and they take time, right? I mean, they take time to get through,
well,
so.
can we start that process like Delaware Avenue or whatnot? Cause we talked about that 6 months ago here. I'm not sure we've started. Not 6 months ago, probably 4 months ago.
Yes, we can look at them.
Like, yeah, tomorrow, right? That kind of concept. I don't know why we wait to ask for permission. Takes so long to get it.
So it's borders of the United States and there's a lot of environmental, restrictions on what you're doing there and how it
Right.
affects, the habitat there. This particular plan, once we submit the grant and hire a consultant to do the design on the stream bank restoration, then that gives us the ability to apply for a grant that would pay for the dredging that is associated with that stream bank alignment.
So you want to make it like a package deal?
That way,
Yeah.
the justification for the dredging is in a formal report and then funded through various grant agencies.
I'm just, I hate to be a downer all the time here on this subject, but sediment is continually coming down on us from up north. It's never gonna stop. I know you talked about a maintenance program, but I'm wondering how often are we gonna have to do this? Cause we get a lot of sediment coming down from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so one of the recommendations, which we didn't hit on yet, was, yes, you're correct. A lot of the sediment, the majority of the sediment is coming from upstream of the town boundaries. And one of our recommendations is in the near term to start conversations to, I think that there could be a regional sediment management program that could happen, but it's going to involve partnerships with upstream neighbors, with, Cecil County, Chester County. I think, perhaps the Maryland DNR and Department of Ag, they could be partners in this, but that's gonna take a while, right? You're not gonna flip a switch and stop the sediment, but I think, it's worth having those, starting that process and maybe seeing if there can be a program put in place to do some conservation measures upstream that would reduce the sediment. In the meantime, yes, we've proposed these measures which get some of the sediment out of the stream, but it's gonna have to be maintained. I mean, there's, until the sediment that's coming into the stream is reduced, you're gonna have to keep removing it. And I think if you do the projects and note what the optimal, what the channel should look like and document that, and then, it's gonna have to be monitored and, maintained to that level on a regular basis.
Just curious as to what level it needs to be dredged to prevent it from coming out of its banks.
You're talking about for like the largest storms to keep it in the bank of the Big Elk Creek.
Talking about a yearly storm that puts cars underwater. This is not
We
unusual,
had 3 in December of 23.
right?
Yeah, I think that the projects that we're talking about here are gonna help with those storms that you're having on an annual basis. I mean, it's not the water is still gonna come out of the banks in a 10-year storm, a 100-year storm, certainly. But, getting that sediment will help so that you're not having as many of these, floods 3 times in 1 month, right? It'll help with those more frequent events that you're getting.
Right, I totally agree it will help, but I'm just wondering what depth it needs to be dredged to be able to handle that. And then on low tide, you got a long drop from the bank to the water. Then I see a danger.
Yeah, so that all that's being balanced throughout those designs, right? We can't just go in there and say, here's the level. It needs to be looked at each spot. The tidal water is different than the non-tidal water. The flow that it's going, I mean, for some of these, if you think about it, Mayor Alt brought it up. If you look at 2-foot reduction over that entire area of the creek, that's a lot of water. If you want to talk about 5 foot over that entire, or 6 foot or whatever it is, you know, you're gonna have to go a lot deeper in that. And that's where, you know, the discussion about Eder Park, if that's a feasibility or an aspect of a venue that could go down with the Little League relocating somewhere else, that would be something that would provide a lot of extra volume.
I would tell you that it was, well over 15, 16 feet in the town in West Virginia that I was telling you about. And by spreading it out, it doesn't even go to the levee bank.
Right.
Any longer. Now, the worst one that I had seen here, we used to have a basketball rim down by, in our parking lot down past the farmer's market, and it was over that rim. So it was 10 feet, was the highest I ever seen it. And it was, so I know we've had it that high, but I also understand that if you spread it out, it will make a difference. You gotta dredge a little bit, you gotta spread it out a little bit, and it will work. But Danielle, you did have a comment. Go ahead and finish.
Sorry, it's early day at school to pick up.
Okay.
No, I wanted to know, like, I think what you said about, do you create a committee? Like, we have all these other committees. I love what Jean's saying, but you hear timelines and capacity, you know, we're gonna do this so that then we can do that. And then once we do this, then we're gonna do that. And I feel like the amount of time that takes, if there was a committee of some sort, to kind of come up with all of these different opportunities, all of the follow-up that you would expect, I think it could move a lot quicker, and the town could have a lot more diverse options as to solutions. I just think that having the town by themselves being, you know, you guys up there, Jean and all of her work and everything else that she does, this has been a problem for so long to, you know, Commissioner Brumel just suggested, why don't we apply now? Well, that's something that could be brought up through a work group that's constantly only thinking about this issue, only addressing the issue, working with the consultants. I think our flooding problems beyond that, we have a problem with economic development. As a lender, trying to sell these buildings on Main Street with the flood insurance required, nobody wants to pay flood insurance. And even though they do, they don't put in a claim because the cleanup may be $12,000. It's more beneficial to do that than to have the increase in their flood insurance costs. So we are being charged, you know, our Elkton Alliance organization to fill this Main Street and to revitalize. But it is a huge problem when every bit of parking for the residents and the constituents of our area can't park there. We can't fill them with retail spaces because they get fed up after 2 or 3 years and they bail. So I think having a dedicated group of people like we do with planning and zoning and permit and all these other things for flooding, I think we're at a point where we need that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we'll work with Jean, and I think we're all on the same page.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have one more presentation here. Are we on the page? Flood prediction. SAS, are you online? Are you here?
Good afternoon.
Hey, Tyson. Oh, well, we got you on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can hear you.
All right. Thanks everybody for taking the time. I think what we talk about here in our
Sorry to
presentation.
delay you so much.
What's that?
It's a long meeting, so appreciate your patience.
Yeah, anytime. And I think our presentation will dovetail in quite nicely with the engineering study that was just conducted.
Yes.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right, please let me know if you can see everything.
He's gonna explain. Can you give us can you give the board, explain exactly who you guys are? So, I know Gene Minner and I have met with you. But I would like for you to introduce yourself to the remainder of our board and, our friends that are in the meeting today.
Absolutely. So my name is Tyson Eckentile. I work for SAS, which at its origination stood for Statistical Analysis Software. It was founded by Dr. Goodnight down at NC State University in North Carolina almost 50 years ago. Dr. Goodnight is still our active CEO, and SAS was founded out of the agricultural department for forecasting crop yields. It was one of the first ever implementations of analytics, and Dr. Goodnight and his other co-founders, as well as SAS, have been coined the grandfathers of analytics. So we've been around the block. We are about a $5 billion company. We are still privately held, so we're one of the largest privately held companies in the world, and one that oftentimes people don't necessarily hear of, but I can guarantee that you interact with SAS, if not on a daily basis, certainly a weekly basis. Some of those examples, just for reference, are we're talking to the public sector here. In the state of Maryland, SAS helps with the state budgeting and forecasting year over year. Many states around the United States use our analytics for forecasting of budgets. We also, many of the major credit card companies use us for fraud detection. So if you ever get an alert for fraud, that is powered by SAS analytics. So we are greatly used across many different industries. And then myself and a couple of folks that might chat here today with you all, we represent the Internet of Things, which is just really data in motion division. We sit within R&D, and our core charter is to actually use our technology to solve some of the world's most challenging problems. And so we'll talk a little bit here about flood, which is the most frequent natural disaster across the world and causes the most economic impact across the world. So I'll stop there if there's any additional questions about who SAS is. And I'll maybe introduce one other gentleman on the call, which is located within your area and covers the state of Maryland as well as Washington, D.C. So first, any questions?
Nope, keep firing along.
All right. So Jeff, maybe if you could come off mute, just introduce yourself as someone that represents the business unit that's associated with the state of Maryland and Washington, D.C.
Sure, and thanks again for the time, Mayor All and Gene. I know we've had a couple good conversations with y'all, and I think they wanted to bring this before the entire commission. So my name's Jeff Shills. I actually live in South Carolina, but I do represent DC and Maryland, a territory that covers a group of states, including those two. But we were up there in Elkton a few months back and got to see firsthand some of the challenges you're facing, and obviously heard the presentation prior to this one. And as Tyson referenced, I think that what we're going to talk about can dovetail very nicely with that. But I know that we're the last item on the agenda. I've been on boards and commissions, so I know people probably want to get moving along. So I'll turn it back to you, Tyson, and let you talk about our solution.
All right, great. Thanks, Jeff. So we'll start with the genesis of our flood prediction and preparedness solution. So about 5 years ago, as we were partnering with Microsoft from a cloud provider perspective, we set forth an initiative to select 4 solution areas that were in fact global challenges and rather tough to solve for. One of them is around flooding. Some of the others were right after that 5-year introductory point between SAS and Microsoft. We embarked as a global perspective or community on the pandemic. So we actually did a lot of work around forecasting around COVID. We did a lot of the supply chain logistics for the COVID vaccine distribution. So that was one of those areas. And then we look at also things like the global hunger crisis around livestock management and crop yields. And then flooding is one that we'll talk about here today. What we initially wanted to do was first study from a research perspective, the traditional methodologies that are used across the globe for flood prediction awareness, very much similar to the engineering report and study that we just listened to. What we wanted to figure out is how can we supplement and dovetail into this to extend the capabilities using technologies. So we'll talk a little bit about how we complement the engineering approach, and we actually build in all of the engineering insights from these studies, whether it's a stormwater resilience study, looking at the stormwater system, the design, the capacity, friction coefficients inside of the pipes, all the way to the changes of the geospatial aspects. So elevation increase, widening a culvert or a pipe. We can build that into this digital model that we'll talk about. So what we were looking at is improving situational awareness, as we see here on the screen, as a storm or a flooding event unfolds. So we classify situational awareness as sub 24 hours. And we say that because there is a degree of variability that we have to take into consideration, whether it's a microcell burst, right, that doesn't pop up perhaps on your weather forecasting system, but you detect those changes to the environment. So we don't have as much time to predict because it popped up, out of nowhere. But once we detect that change in the environment, we start modeling to give those analytical insights as quickly as possible, all the way to a design storm such as Milton that, the South. I actually live in Florida now. I am currently in New Jersey, not down in Florida, but as all of Florida is watching, and we've been watching it for days, we can take in all of that data and start modeling that environment to give more of an advanced warning out to 7 days. And then, of course, situational awareness is sub 24 hours. We expanded the solution capabilities to target all three phases of flood mitigation and awareness. So we have the planning and preparation phase, which is phase 1, the situational awareness as it unfolds, which is phase 2, and then the recovery and response, which is phase 3. And we'll talk about how we use the digital twin to target all three of those phases. Ultimately, our first trial of the solution about 4 years ago was down in the greater Raleigh area, looking at the top of their watershed to help both that specific area of the watershed as well as the downstream communities from a regional data sharing play. So we had some sensors that we strategically placed into the environment for looking at precipitation amounts and intensity, looking at the flow rates within stream, creeks, and even stormwater systems, and looking at surface water levels. And then, of course, we ingest a lot of information from weather forecasting systems. We know that USGS already has some sensors within your area. We'll talk more about some of the IP that we've created, about where we can strategically place these items or sensors that help power a more intuitive and success-based model. So I want to talk a little bit about what the solution includes, and then how that persists across all three phases. So we'll just talk quickly here. This is the actual application. We have the plotting of all of the data points, whether it's a USGS sensor, a NOAA buoy, a sensor that the municipality or surrounding municipality has deployed that we pull in because it's publicly available. These all get plotted inside of the application, and we run machine learning algorithms on these sensors for a myriad of things. One is to predict the levels of every single data point that it's going to generate, both now in real time and then in 6-minute intervals, 12 hours into the future. And that's a sensor-based prediction. We also look at things like hyadographs, so rain intensity and propensity over time using localized weather stations. If a state has mesonet, we pull in that data as well. If there's localized rain gauges, we'll pull in that information. And a lot of times, police stations, hospitals, schools, fire stations, they may already have that data that they generate and post publicly. Ultimately, all of this data is built into a digital twin that looks at a forecast and inundation model. And that's the bottom right. And that's where you're looking at the Doppler radar of inundation. And so we're going to spend some time in how we create that digital model and how it generates these insights across all three phases of flooding. I just wanted to show that there's sensor-based or individual data-based insights where we monitor all of the data points for uptime, right? We can identify when it needs to be recalibrated, resurveyed, because we start to understand the baseline of that data. And then when you deploy these anomaly detection models, they detect when something is out of the norm. And we now know if there's leaf debris buildup. We even now know if it's a spider that's building web inside of that specific sensor, all the way to if it's a T-bar that was surveyed. Sometimes young adults and kids like to swing on them into the water. We understand when it needs to be recalibrated, resurveyed, because that data does not look quote unquote normal. So there's a lot of different information that's built into that application, but what we're going to focus on is on the bottom right, that forecasted flood inundation analysis and model powered by a digital twin. So one thing that we wanted to account for is a limitation around the traditional approach. And the traditional approach really looks at flooding from a river or a creek perspective, where the river or the creek overflows or you have coastal surge. What we also want to take into consideration is where we look at all of the runoff and the directions that that runoff flows. If you look at Hurricane Helene in the western North Carolina region, what they initially had was 2 to 3 days of rain prior to Helene making landfall and moving its way into that region. So you had a lot of water that was running off of the mountains down into those communities. It was filling the streams and the creeks. So you didn't just have these creeks that were overtopping or these rivers that were overtopping. It was compounded by the runoff that was associated with that terrain or those elevations and undulations. It's no different for a very densely urban populated environment, because now you have an impervious surface where you still have that water that's running off, right? It's running off into a drain, into a stormwater system. Ultimately, those get backed up. You have a reverse flow and they overtop through that drain. So we account for not just the levels inside of the natural waterways, we also account for the amount of water that is precipitating or the ice or snow that is melting and the runoff of such water into the various systems. So we use a technological tool that is quote unquote a digital twin. What it really is it's just a virtual representation of a real world entity and the associated processes within that entity. So we digitize the physical environment, right, using geospatial techniques that we'll walk through. And then we are virtually representing the flow of water against that digital representation of the environment. And so when we take a look at what that really looks like, this is the pretty picture of how we build that out. We look at things and we ingest the digital elevation models. We look at the soil composition and the infiltration rate, right? So the different type of surgo soil layers, all of that gets built into this digital twin. We look at the flow resistance, so essentially the land cover and the vegetation that provides flow resistance. We can even build in, if there's a forest fire, the burn scars and understanding what that means from a flow resistance within water. We build in all the impervious surfaces, parking lots, roads, buildings, waterways, all into this digital twin. And by the way, we've done an assessment that we can share after this call for Elkton, building out that digital twin and that digital model. We build in the stormwater system capacity and design. So if there was a resiliency study of the stormwater system, understanding the diameters, if it was built in different periods of time, understanding what the friction coefficients are within that stormwater system, we can build that into the entire digital twin. And we can do it very quickly. Then we factor in all the real-time data attributes. This is the weather forecast, whether it's from NOAA, from the National Weather Service, weather underground. We actually integrate all of them because all of those together collectively give us a stronger output of the model. And then it's the sensor information, whether it's from NOAA or USGS, or we put sensors into the environment strategically. We build all of that into the digital twin as well. And so now we can take a look at how we create this grafting technique, which is the individual cell that represents locations across the entire digital twin. So we'll build this out, right? Here's the digital elevation model. This is actually a grafting technique for one of our clients in North Carolina. Now we build in the surgo soil layer and the infiltration rates, the flow resistance offered by land cover, the runoff from this impervious surface. So all the impervious surface within that graft. We look at the stormwater system capacity and design. So we integrate the shape files. Now we're factoring in real-time sensing capabilities. So the water and the rain level from forecasting, you can see how that's dynamic and it's changing, minute by minute, second by second. Now we have the environmental sensing. So all those sensors that we strategically placed into the environment. Ultimately, what we've done is we've created almost like the middle and high school old graphing paper, right? That's what we've overlaid into your environment and we've created it virtually. We can manipulate any of those cells. So we can get down to as granular as 10 feet by 10 feet. So we're talking about entryways to commercial structures. We're talking individual residential properties. And then, of course, for areas that are less densely populated, we can go all the way up to 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet. But we are down to intersections. We are down to front doors and understanding all the environmental characteristics that we have now represented digitally. We can manipulate those. So we just heard from an engineering firm where they were talking about sediment changes, right? So you can reference putting all the silt and changing that soil composition. Elevation changes. So if you're increasing the elevation of a bank or you're increasing the diameter of a stormwater system, we can ingest that in all the areas that it's referenced inside of that digital twin. That way we can model from an analytically backed simulation events that have already occurred for Elkton, and then that traditional 5, 20, 50, and 100-year storm to see not just what are the impacts based on those changes to that localized area, but also be mindful that water doesn't have boundaries. Does that impact another area of Elkton or even your surrounding communities? So on the bottom right is now where you have, and I'll play it again, you are now making these predictions and you're predicting the level of inundation or flooding within that area. This is a prediction, right? So this is Doppler radar specifically for the level of inundation of water into the future. So every 6 minutes, just like Doppler radar, we post what we believe will be the level of water in a specific area. And then you play that 12 hours into the future, and it gives you an idea of how quickly the levels of inundation will take shape within an environment or a community. What I'll share with you, and then we'll open up for some questions and dialogue, is this is one of our clients where we also ingested a data source around hydroplaning standards based on state and county roads. So essentially the roadways that are most traveled. What we did is we understand what is the safe passage surface water level. We build that into the overall digital twinner model. We run our analysis during an event. So this was an actual event on Friday, April 7th of 2023. And we flag when those areas of road are going to be inundated with a water level that is unsafe for passage. So we'll go ahead and play this. Again, the alerts are pre-populated because this is a prediction. So this is what we're predicting is going to happen in the future. So we already pre-populate the alerts, and then you can see the yield signs will start to pop up based on different timestamps when that actually starts to take place from the moment that the stormwater manager was looking at the predictions. So the stormwater manager's, essentially hitting play on what the inundation might be. And you can see that over time, and I think this is a 2-hour timestamp that we ran. This was a microcell burst, by the way. That's why it was hard to, once they detected that change and we started modeling the environment. You can hover over that yield sign for a roadway. You can see the actual lat long coordinates, the level of surface water in the inundation, and this helps streamline the response to flooding. So you can appropriately staff from a signage perspective of public works. You can go out and close those roads proactively to prevent passage. You can redo your evacuation routes. And then I'll use another example down in Washington, D.C. We were given a challenge to see if we could have predicted in advance the surface water level or inundation for district dogs. And so we were able to predict that over 4 hours and specifically knew the level of inundation to that doorway. So if you had that 4 hours, I think it was about 4 hours and 17 minutes of advance warning, you have a couple of options, right? You can evacuate all of those dogs, or if you have less time because say you didn't know where to evacuate, we would have known the level of water that would be at that front door. Therefore, you could have erected a barrier, perhaps sandbags to redirect that flow. What's interesting is that you also would have been able to build into the model if you were to increase that elevation or barrier by say 18 inches and simulate that redirection of water. Because again, doing so might cause that water to go to the building next door, which would create a secondary problem. So again, this is a digital representation of the environment. It's built for situational awareness, which is phase 2, but it persists over time. So when you create that digital twin or representation, you can manipulate any of those cell features to ingest all of the information that was just presented to the city of Elkton around the infrastructure changes, and then simulate all those different storms that have already happened, as well as the traditional annual 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100-year storm to see what those impacts might be to the specific location and the surrounding area based on those infrastructure changes. So I'll stop there if there's any questions or anything else you'd like us to review based on our approach and modeling.
Could this information be placed on a town website that the residents could actually watch it as it's happening?
Absolutely. So what we do is we work with our end clients on the internal and external stakeholder communication. So consider it an 80-20. The models are already created, right? We will deploy the models for all the different insights. We'll tweak them over a 3 to 4 month period. It's fit for your environment. And then that 20% is really if you have additional insights. So a new screen that we want to create for maybe it's the public works department wants to see something a little differently. And then of course, how we communicate the alerts. So we have an ability, and I'll give you 2 examples, where you can have alerts, SMS alerts to a specific emergency response team, a stormwater team that can also integrate with camera feeds. So let's say we suspect flooding at a major intersection, and we want to pull back an image from a camera feed. We can actually have that alert generated when we predict a certain level of water on that intersection, and we can pull back periodic images if it's, say, off hours for that emergency response team, so they can see firsthand. This is the prediction. This is actually what it looks like now. Another example would be if we want to create a portal that the citizens and the community can come in and take a look at the levels of inundation, the amounts that can be expected, when they can expect it, to help them take action to protect their families and as well as their assets.
Thank you. Anyone from the board have any questions? Lou, you have a question?
Absolutely not.
All right.
Marvelous presentation.
Well, our town administrator, actually, I think I mentioned this to you in our meeting. Lewis has a spot on the Big Elk Creek that he takes a look at, and he knows if the
USGS site.
the USD, what is it?
USGS site.
Yeah, the USGS site.
Up near Brewster's Bridge.
And he knows when we're gonna have flooding down here, but I like the idea of being able to make sure our residents are aware of it. Gene, do you have any further comments about this? You've been in a couple of the meetings also.
Do you know if there's any grant opportunities to pay for this type of analysis and software?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Tyson. Yeah, so there's a comprehensive flood management program, grant program at the Department of Environment that's funded in the state budget that towns and municipalities, counties can submit an application for. What we would suggest would be doing like a 2-year pilot, because the goal would be that the state, once a couple of these get picked up in different parts of the state, then this might be something that the state would fund going forward. So a grant for application for a 2-year pilot might be a good starting point.
Has any other community done this before in Maryland?
We are talking to a handful right now, different, both at the county level and multiple counties actually, and then multiple towns. And we have some that are in the process of putting together applications, and others I believe will be shortly.
Well, very good. You guys have any comments? Anyone else have any comments? I'd like to ask you to forward over that information to me once again, so it's on top of my email list, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely.
And we really appreciate you coming today.
No, for sure. We appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone have anything to say for the good of the town of Elkton?
Yeah, I appreciate Brad coming in today and offering what he has. I think that can take a lot off of us if we pursue that. And We just don't need to let that sit.
Thank you.
I would like to commend the Cecil County Chamber for their annual Business by the Bonfire they had last week, followed by the Elkton Alumni Night downtown, both fantastic events.
Thank you. Gene, any comments?
No, except for, Danielle mentioned the lady that,
Ray Federici.
okay, that's joined what?
She's on the Alliance Board. She's
Yeah.
also a business owner downtown.
Okay, I mean, have you met her, Jean, at all? I think it'd
think
be a
so.
great idea. She seems like a gift as a resource. If we can get anything out, for her to help us is huge, absolutely huge. So maybe Danielle's idea of formulating or initiating some sort of committee, I tend to agree with. But it's something that I think Jean should put together or recommend, if you agree. If you agree. And that's all I have.
Very good. John, how close are we to a settlement?
Maybe next week.
All right, good news.
Right now, it's, for lack of a better term, herding cats. So everybody's got busy lives and we're trying to focus it. The one thing right now is we got the engineering drawings and milers signed off by the sellers and they would be before the question. So we have the booking page reference. The reference is referenced in other documents. So we need to get that. And that's, we haven't, Jim, we get.
Oh, I would give it a little bit more time. I have to get the chairman of the planning commission to sign the Mylars, and then we have to take them down to land records and get them recorded.
Good to go. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.